Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network. And we are back here, joined live by Tony Marolt. Excited to have him here, our author, our friend, our coach, and so much more. And we had a great conversation, as we always do. We're going through his book right now, one of them. Would you mind introducing yourself to everyone to start?
Sure, Jill. My name is Tony Marolt. I'm the author of The Leadership Quotient. And it's a book about applying practical kinds of tools to your leadership bucket based on 9 years in the Navy leading groups of people and 25 plus years, at Hallmark Cards. At the time, it was a Fortune 500 company.
Wow. And tell us the name of the company. Lead Left, Grow Right.
Yes, the company is Lead Left, Grow Right, LLC. And the lead left comes from if anyone reads the books or has listened to any of the podcasts, leading left is really about doing things in some cases in very non-traditional ways, in some cases just different ways from the normal thought of leadership, but with a different, more focused emphasis on actually doing exercises, practicing leadership traits to get better at each and every one.
Yep. And to recap from chapter 6, the never mistake leadership for position or title or position title for leadership.
Right.
Do you want to expand a little more on that? And
Sure.
Tell us again, does leadership come from the middle, the top, or where specifically?
Sure. For those watching the video cast, you'll see some of that recap on the board behind me. And leadership is not equal to position or title. Some people think that it is. In the worst run companies, people always defer to the person who's in a higher position on the corporate or organizational hierarchy. And true leadership, because it involves not just getting things done, but also bringing people along with that and nurturing those people. Just because your name is a CFO doesn't mean you're a great leader necessarily. Might mean you know how to do books really well and invest, but right.
Well, it's always a pleasure to have you here. And let's talk more in regards to the, what do we call it? Mediocrity in a sense, in leadership in a sense, with best being versus good enough, and who defines mediocrity and what effect does it have in promotions with organizations?
Well, and I really liked your phrase there about mediocrity and who defines it.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of companies don't take the time, you're so spot on, to actually figure out what are the leadership or other core competencies or capabilities that an individual must have. They just kind of do a brush over if they do that at all. Some companies don't even define the skills that they want people to have other than the word itself. And so based on how people define mediocrity, based on how they define the skill sets, and more, as importantly, the behaviors. Sometimes companies do a really great job, right, of specifying, well, here's the skills you must have. You must be able to type 120 words per minute, be fluent in Microsoft Office products, but they don't define behaviors associated with that and what that looks like. Because that's what really, that's how things work or don't work within an organization, is how well people work with each other. And more often than not, that is a behavior. So do you leave carnage in your wake every time you talk to somebody at a meeting?
Yeah.
Or have you really contributed in a very neutral way, but getting your point across firmly, and that's allowed to stand? Then that's great. So mediocrity, a lot of times people have been running their whole life to get to a certain position, back to our first thing about position or title, and they get there and they just kind of sit there. They don't try to improve themselves at that point. They're just being mediocre. And
Mm-hmm.
on the board behind me under mediocrity, I have, is it good enough or is it the best? Depending again on your insightful comment, how well you define mediocrity, how well you define
Yep.
traits of any job, that's going to decide whether where you're good enough and where you're best. I don't think any company wants to be just good enough. That's kind of the low bar for people. Every company wants every individual, and it wants that organization to move forward and to aspire to greater things constantly.
Got it. Got it. And for those of you watching this, you can read it right above his head.
Yeah.
Meteorocracy. Good enough. Best. I'm so glad you put it up there as a reminder. So what would be the best way to gain power?
The best way to gain power, as Jill sits there and smiles at me, is to give it up, because we've talked about it so often. And giving up in this sense, being able to delegate the proper authority and accountability for getting a job done, a task done, but the overall accountability still rests with you. As Harry Truman says, the buck stops here. So you can't overdo it and just say, okay, I'm gonna be delegating everybody and just give everyone a whole bunch of tasks. And when you give everybody a whole bunch of tasks without defining what they should do, or what the objective is, what the outcome looks like, then no, that is not delegating responsibly. So you have to learn it yourself first, and then practice it on those who are either peers or senior to you, or those you lead.
Yeah, absolutely. Leaders, followers, all in the middle. I mean, yeah. And yeah, gosh. So kiss up. What about the talk of empowerment? I
Yeah.
see
So
behind you up there.
yeah. So I've kind of identified 4 tracks. I'm sure there are others, but the 4 broad categories are: one, you can kiss up exclusively, which means your way to a career path forward, you believe, is to kiss up to those around you and those above you. That can work, but it generally only works on, at least on a continuing basis, on people that don't have a lot of integrity or narcissists themselves. If you just like to always be praised, and that's how you get yes men or yes women from people that are kissing up exclusively. The other one is one that many of us were brought up, either in our families or through friends or whomever, and it's work hard and get noticed. And that works to a point, but as you try to either go up the ladder or spread yourselves more continuously to different assignments, but at the same level, unless you get people to know who you are, unless you make an effort to understand how their parts of the company work, then it's very difficult to just automatically get noticed. Particularly, when you get into middle management, senior executives, all those things, it's working hard and getting noticed. You have to, and it's sometimes taken as a bad word, but you have to promote yourself. But you can do that in a very authentic way. And I find the easiest way, because I was not a big networker myself, until I had some great coaching by a great leader of mine named Gina. And she coached me really well to go into what can sometimes be perceived as a false conference, like scheduling a lunch with, let's say, the CFO, or scheduling a lunch with the director of information technology for a particular area. She said, go into it really as though you're wanting to learn about their area. And if you do that, sometimes a spark will be lit and you'll start to develop some chemistry on a professional or personal level. But just don't go in there schmoozing all the time, because people can, kind of spot a rat pretty quickly. And then the third one is about there's an old saw, make new friends, but keep the old one as silver and one's gold. I call that professional gardening. So as you move around, you're going to, let's say you go to conferences or move to other parts of the company, you're going to gain a whole bunch of different friends. And you ultimately have to decide what friend means to you. But as you continue to go up and grow yourself and meet other people, remember that those are your greatest mentors or greatest advocates. Make sure you stay in touch with them. And I call that professional gardening. They're the old friends that are going to stand by you, hopefully for the long term. But if they don't ever, they're like, oh man, I haven't heard from you, Tony, in 6 years. That's not professional gardening. You got to water the relationships. And the last is hitch your wagon to a star. And that's all well and good, except if that star or senior leader or whomever you're hitching to leaves the company or moves to another department, then you're kind of you're out there as a boat with no sails and no rudder. You just get pushed around on the ocean like a bobber or a piece of cork on the ocean.
Yep. All right. So let's go into chapter 7, which is the advanced course in leadership today. And I know you talk about the circle of praise and fear. Can you tell us what that is specifically?
Yeah. Let me just set the tone for the chapter overall. This
Yeah.
is more about advanced tools, but really anyone can practice these. They're just more difficult in the sense of you personally having to overcome perhaps some personal fears, or you are not a good process person. There's a lot of process work in here. But on the circle of praise or fear, it's a really, really powerful tool. And I've used this several times. It's very difficult to execute in some ways, but in others it's not. So the circle of praise or fear is about when you get a group of people together that have been working. It could be a project team, it could be your own little finance group, it could be marketing or product development, whatever a group is that you have worked on pretty continuously. You can use this circle of praise or fear. And the circle of praise or fear is to do a couple of things. One, it offers you as an individual the opportunity to convey to others what you think of them. Yeah. But you're doing it in a public forum.
Mm-hmm.
So that's there's lots of people aren't willing to do that. But you're trying to do two things to this exercise. One is to praise every individual on that team for something. And the second thing is, now that we've praised, the opposite is, slam or take down or whatever. That's not what we do. We do it, but in a much different way. And the question, so the first one about praising people, it's pretty easy. About what I appreciate most about you, Jill, is that you're always on time. You have a very professional manner. You're very articulate and responsive to your customers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the easy one. Now, the other one where you're trying to bring attention to something that maybe doesn't work for you personally. You're not trying to make a slam and say, well, the whole group thinks that you're angry. But on a personal level, what you say is these exact words. Joe, what would help me do my job better is if you called me 10 minutes before the broadcast and kind of let me know how things are shaping up in your day and what kind of anxiety you might have about the topic that we're covering, as an example.
Mm-hmm.
So it sends a message to you saying, oh, if you're open to becoming better, you say, oh, okay. You
I
might
wish
be
I
able to.
could. I'm booked back to back. And then we had an issue,
I
so I
know.
can't. But yeah, so
Yeah,
we're always like 2 minutes. I'm sorry. That's part of
oh,
the job.
no, that wasn't intended as slam. It was just a made up example. But
No, it's a good
um,
example. I know. And some people
yeah.
want to talk earlier and I just can't. But yes, it would be more thorough if we had the time. Yes, I agree.
Well,
More
so
productive.
as an example, I had a gentleman on my team, and really whip smart guy, good analyst and stuff. But he was kind of off-putting to people because he was so incisive and always logically driven. So for him, I said, what would help me do my job better, John, is if you would express your emotions less stringently and stridently during our conversations. Sometimes I think you can come across as off-putting. So what would help me, and again, it's not necessarily, it could be the whole team that year. The whole team will know, oh yeah, John's always like that, but it's about me. So you make it a personal connection, but by saying, what would help me do my job better? That's way different than, John, you're a butt at most meetings, right? You would never call anyone out, you know, in front of a whole bunch of people to say that. Well, so the way this works on a circle of praise or fear is you start off yourself because you're enacting this exercise, and you go all around the table and you do that to people. John, what I most appreciate about you is this. John, will help me do my job better is if you did this. Next, Karen, what would help me do my job, or what way around. So as a leader now, you've set the example for everybody, and it will be really uncomfortable the first time. And some people feel that, oh, it'd be better if you kind of gave us a heads up on this. However, I find that if you do this right, you can easily do this as I did without any preparation. It happened to be a staff meeting, and I created this in my mind of what I wanted to do. And so then you can start coaching them through it. And some will say, okay, Nancy, say something to John. Well, I don't really know. So what does John do that is really helpful to you in your job? Oh, well, he always comes by the office and asks how my day is going. Perfect. That's a great one.
Yeah.
Well, I don't really want to say anything about any people. Okay, well, so what would help you do your job better if Sarah did what? Well, if she came to the team meetings more regularly, that would personally help me, because sometimes I have to explain it. Okay, perfect. Now, once you get through the first couple of people, they start getting into it. They're still very uncomfortable, but you do this the second time around another day. You can use this as an ongoing feedback mechanism for really that group forever and ever. You don't want to do it every week or something like that, but if you want to give feedback and praise without it being an official performance review, and think about the trust that generates on your team. Because if you can go through that hard exercise saying what I appreciate about you and here's what helped me do better, you're raising all boats in the slips. Because and now everyone's like, wow, that wasn't that hard. And I think John knows now that this is how it goes and how he can help me, and maybe he'll be working on it a little bit. It can be a difficult thing, but if you do it correctly, it will work great. And the other big rule is when you start off in the beginning, is you express to them, here's what we're going to say, the two questions, is two things. One is all you can do when someone gives you feedback, either positive or here's what helped me, is simply say thank you. You can't go and start defending yourself or anything like that. You simply say thank you. I appreciate the feedback. And then two, you have to tell people, and you can't skip, because that's a thing that happens a lot, right? In meetings is people like to, well, I'll talk later. Well, if you talk later, you put it off, then oftentimes it never happens. So,
True. It does. It's called procrastination.
yep,
We've all been
exactly.
there, right?
Yep, exactly.
Unfortunately, that's right. So what else in the book did you want to highlight for today?
Well, we probably just have a few minutes left. I guess we can finish up a couple other topics. I really have three more to talk about, but let's talk about one that we can cover here in just a few minutes. So, as I said, this chapter is also as much about process as it is these advanced tools like the circle of praise and fear. So, truth and perception, I think it's really good and healthy for people to have a discussion about truth and perception, because the standard answer is, well, perceptions, that's reality. Sometimes that's very true. Sometimes it's not, but you have to at least recognize it and work to correct that perception. If in this case, they still think that that's true about you. So speaking the truth, that has to start with personal integrity. It has to start with integrity across the stream, or across the team rather. And perception, you can control perception to some degree, sometimes significantly, right? If you don't want to get labeled as, well, yeah, they don't really care about their job because I'm a person that values being on time and they're always late for work and the boss never says anything about them, or they're the one we have to wait on whenever there's a conference room meeting. If someone tells you about that, that's very easy to correct if you want. Might be hard for you, but you can have control over that perception by just coming to things on time, whether it's work or meetings or Zoom calls or whatever. And over time, that perception changes, and now you've created a different truth, which is, well, Tony's he's not late anymore. He's focused, and so that makes me feel like he's more professional than he was before. You are smiling. Can you hear me?
Gosh, the button's on. I said, never in my life have I really talked to anyone like you. You're so unique in what you're doing, what you're saying, and how it relates on an everyday level. It's like, yeah.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate that feedback. I don't know if I'm that different, but at least I've packaged things differently, and I do want to encourage people to think differently. So your smile meant a lot to me when I was talking about
Thank
that.
you.
Very much. So I think we're probably almost out of time, correct?
Yeah, we are. 2 more minutes.
Yeah. So maybe in that time, I can remind people, because a later show, we haven't nailed down the time yet, but just to let listeners and viewers know, we're going to have the ability to ask me questions, and they'll be sent in. We'll let you know how to do that, and then I can answer that on one of our future sessions, Jill. And so to remind people that you can do this at any time, you don't have to wait for that opportunity. But my contact information is tony.marolt, Marolt, tony.marolt @gmail.com. You can go to my website, leadleftgrowright.com, and you can submit a note through the website and it'll come directly to me. If you want to give me a call, I'm very open to doing that. So 816-694-4656.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tony. Pleasure talking to you as always. And
all right,
we'll be in touch, I guess, next week, right? I hope.
Yep, I think so.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Jill. All right,
have a great day, Tony. Bye-bye.
All right.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
Mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.